10 seconds from now, a star will forget how to shine, 1,000 fleets will lose their voices at once, and a woman who can hush the sky will decide whether our universe gets to keep telling its story. Stay with me to the last breath, because only then will I give you the 3 words she writes into the beginning of a brand new cosmos. They called her Tamsin Quell. On paper, Warden of the Eclipse Temple, an orbital monastery moored to the limb of a dying sun, custodian of the Cradle, the seed that can start a universe. Off paper, daughter of Quis, goddess of silence. Tamsin's pulse lived between heartbeats most of us will never hear. When she exhaled with intention, signals folded. Radios forgot themselves. Armies learned briefly what it meant to listen. The temple was not a building. It was a question floating in vacuum. What do you owe a future that hasn't asked to be born? Its heart, the cradle, looked like a dark blossom caged in glass. Priests called it a seed. Physicists called it an inflation kernel. Poets called it too many names and then went quiet, which is a kind of prayer. The war found the temple the way wars find anything that looks like hope. The Concord arrived first, our ships, chipped paint and stubborn math. The second to drop out of translation was a hive fleet with hulls like bone and sails like muscle, the Chorum. We called them invaders because a better word would have taken one more breath. They fired in wide arcs, not for kill, but for corridor. The Concord answered, the way people answer when someone strange runs for the only door in a burning building. Tamsin, said Prior Aridia, voice thin over a channel already fraying. Mute them. Tamsin stepped into the hushed chamber, the room where she carried her mother's gift like a blade she refused to draw unless she could bear the bill. She laid her palm on the resonant, and every emitter in the belt leaned toward her hand. Quiet, she said. Across 100 light minutes, the sky obeyed. Missiles forgot arguments. Orders arrived as nothing. For a minute that felt like a vow, war made no sound. That night, because you measure nights in space by promises kept, Tamsin led a delegation from the Chorum into the temple. They wore no helmets. Their mouths were not mouths. They spoke in harmonics you feel more than hear, the way you feel thunder in your ribs. We are not conquest, said the chord that was their chorus. We are escape. Our adjacent reality is collapsing. Horizon rot consumes constants. We smelled a viable seed here and came like any creatures would, running. Your seed, Aridia said, a line of steel in her throat. Our universe. Tamsin listened to both truths until they hurt in different places. She could taste the Chorum's panic in the air like metal and cinnamon. She could smell the Concord's fear, old and familiar as oil on a deck. She carried both and went to the only voice that had ever taught her how to hold 2 hard things without breaking the smaller one. She went to her mother. Quis did not fill rooms. She emptied them, gently. Tamsin found her in the temple's shadow garden where lamps were tuned to dusk and everything important happens. The goddess wore a face you would not remember on a street, and never forget in a dream. Daughter, said the hush between their words. Are they lying? Tamsin asked. Are the Chorum thieves dressed as pilgrims? All fugitives steal time, said Quis. Some repay it. Some don't. That is not the question we are pretending it is. The question is simpler. Will you midwife an ending, or will you watch 2 galaxies bleed? Tamsin tried to breathe and found the room short of air. If I open the cradle, she said, the child cosmos will erase the parent. That is the law. Laws bend where silence holds them, Quis murmured, a tide touching 2 shores. But every exception writes a cost. If you would cradle a birth without erasure, someone must become the hush that separates bang from bloom, long enough to move the living without breaking either sky. Someone, Tamsin said, and both understood the pronoun in a way that hurt. The Concord's admirals demanded deterrence. The Chorum's choir mothers begged for ignition. The temple's sisters sharpened liturgies into knives. Between petitions, Tamsin walked the radial spine and listened to the dying star whistle through its teeth. Here is the peace almost no one tells. When you can silence the world, you learn which words are worth the risk of speaking. She spoke to the Chorum again, without translation gear, body to body in the chamber that remembered all vows. How many can you move if I give you a corridor that isn't a corridor? A note like relief. Enough to start a people over. She spoke to the Concord's scattered ships. Her voice carried on encrypted sync pulses that algorithms mistook for calibration. Stand down when the dark brightens. It is not the enemy. It is mercy. She spoke to Aridia last. I need the temple's consent to lose me. You were never ours to keep, the prior said, and if you've never heard love cleaned of possession, you haven't been in the room where it lives. They prepared the thing no liturgy had the right to name. The cradle hummed. The dying sun dimmed like a house where somebody finally slept. Tamsin stepped into the glass, and the glass forgave her. Sensors called her vital. The temple called her child. The Chorum sang soft as insects. The Concord redirected guns into prayers because people are not immune to awe, and it is their best trait. Explain it to me once, Tamsin told the chief engineer, because engineers are priests with better wrenches. We're going to bias the initial condition, he whispered, afraid to bruise the word. We'll shape the first silence, the caesura between spark and storm, long enough to unfurl a pocket that doesn't overwrite. A second universe budding in the hush, not erasing the first. It only works if the hush is alive. It only holds if the hush can choose. And when the hush lets go? Tamsin asked. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. Quell stood where the reflection should have been. She did not touch Tamsin. She had never needed to. Daughter, the not sound said again, fuller now. If you keep your voice, both skies bruise. If you give it, both skies live. I did not make you to be mine. I made you to be possible. Stay with me, Tamsin said, which is the brave thing you ask when you refuse to pretend you're not afraid. As long as there is a space between what is and what will be, said the mother, I am that space. I will meet you there. The temple opened. The cradle took its first breath. If you're waiting for thunder, you won't hear it. The most dangerous moments in creation sound like a held note. The black blossom unfurled. Not explosion, decision. Matter began thinking about being alive. Time tasted what it would be like to move. In that tenderness, Tamsin did the only thing her bloodline was built for. She held the hush. Across half a spiral arm, calms died in kindness. The Chorum's life pods slid into a dawn that wasn't ours. The Concord watched their enemy vanish into refuge and practiced a discipline that rarely gets medals. They did not follow. The temple strained. The dying star forgot its death and waited. Nothing heroic looks like heroism from up close. It looks like work. Minutes became an hour, then a lifetime measured in cells surrendering their secrets to gravity. Tamsin stood inside the cradle and learned what silence costs when it's allowed to be sanctuary. Her tongue tasted of metal. Her ears filled with salt. She could feel the newborn universe pressing against her palms the way a child presses against a door before school, eager and unknowingly cruel. Let go, said physics. Hold, said love. She held. She held until holding became the only thing left of her that knew how to be a person. Quell's was the steady hand on her back. The temple was the room that understood why breaths matter. The Chorum sang farewell and thank you in the same chord, which is how gratitude sounds when it is honest. At last, the pocket took on its own weight. The new sky learned to count without borrowing our numbers. The hush could let go. Tamsin did not step out. She could not. Silence given at that scale does not return to a throat for conversation. It becomes weather. Her body remained, not sleeping, not stone. Her voice left and learned to be law. In the aftermath, treaties wrote themselves with smaller words. The Concord did not build statues. They built listening posts, tuned not to intercept but to remember. The Chorum sent emissaries through narrow, sanctioned crossings with offerings that hummed like bees and tasted of honest debt. The temple sisters swept floors and watered plants and practiced humility because the only way to honor a miracle is to keep the room clean. Admirals asked for a name for what Tamsin had made. Aridia shook her head. You don't name a kindness that is still working, she said. You keep it fed. Years changed their clothes. The dying sun died as politely as it could. Children grew up under a sky that had learned modesty. In classrooms, the lesson about the night of empty channels ended with a sentence most military histories can't bring themselves to say, we did not fire because someone made room. Sometimes, late, when the temple glided through the granular dark, you could stand in the shadow garden and hear a hush that was an absence. Not quiet. Invitation. The space inside music that makes the note mean something. Once, a novice stood there with Aridia and asked the kind of question that makes teachers braver. "What did she say?" the child whispered. "At the end. The words she put into the new beginning." Aridia looked toward the cradle, where glass showed nothing and everything. "She wrote a message into its first breath," the prior said. "Not instructions. A courtesy. Here are the 3 words Tamsin Quell gave the newborn sky, and by echo, gave back to ours. Leave a witness. A witness in the new cosmos to remember the old, not a god, not a judge, just a memory with hands. A witness in the old to remember the new, not to worship, only to keep us from pretending we are alone. 2 universes, side by side, made kinder by the knowledge that someone is watching not to catch us, but to carry our names. If this story left you a little quieter, in the good way, hit like so it finds the next person who needs a moment of hush. Subscribe to keep traveling with me through worlds where mercy changes physics. And tell me in the comments, if you had the cradle in your hands, would you open it? Or hold until your voice became the room?